Hello, everyone. My name is Luis Correa. Today, we're going to be talking about cardiovascular disease due to vaping, specifically in younger generations. So, to start off, what is CVD? CVD is a bit of a broad term, but essentially, it's diseases affecting the heart or its blood vessels, and it affects the flow of blood to and from the heart. And essentially, it just reduces its function. So, there's going to be increases in blood clots, fatty deposits in arteries, and arterial hardening, and this will cause narrowing, and essentially it just decreases its ability to function as a whole. Um, and one of the main contributors right now to CVD is vaping. To the decrease in use of cigarettes, there's been an increase in vaping and electronic cigarette usage because it's believed to be more healthy, which is not entirely true. So due to the increase in vaping and tobacco products, especially in younger generations, there's been a rise in CVD. And two studies done on humans and on rats with the effects of vaping as a whole found that people who used e-cigarettes were found to have impaired blood vessels. And then blood samples from vapors were found to have a decrease in nitric oxide production. And this is very, very pivotal in dilating and constricting blood vessels. Essentially, this will stop the blood flow as a whole, and it will decrease the function of the heart. So vaping as well was found to make blood vessels more permeable, essentially meaning that it's more likely to have blood leaks, which again decreases the function of blood flow. And then as for the rat study, they were found to be, if they were exposed to vape, it would lead to degradation of blood vessels. But this is mainly due because there's irritants in the airways. And when there's irritants in the airways, it leads the signals from the vagus nerve to be sent to the blood vessels to be damaged. Younger generations have been found to have increasing vaping habits. And so essentially, the vaping epidemic in the United States has risen tremendously, with about 1 in 20 Americans vaping a day and about 1 in 5 being between the ages of 18 to 29. And there's been an increase, about 1,800%, in teens vaping in just 2022 alone. And studies have found that 14.1%, or about like 2.14 million percent of high schoolers, and about 3.3%, or 380,000 middle schoolers were found to have been vaping. And of the statistics, about 2,807 of them visited hospitals due to smoking, and about 5,000 kids less than the age of 5 visited hospitals due to coming into contact with these cigarettes. So this already alone is telling you the severity of vaping and how much it's affecting the youth. So just based off the statistic alone, made by the CDC, more than 2.5 million high schoolers and middle schools currently are using e-cigarettes. And then among those youth, more than 1 in 4 use them daily. And the most commonly used types are the disposable kind of the cigarettes, so not necessarily the ones that can be used consistently. So it's actually just increasing the problem because they have to keep buying more and more. And this has been such a major problem because 85% of those that are used are flavored e-cigarettes. So that means it's not just making them feel better, but it's also tasting better. Okay, so it doesn't just affect the heart. So vaping has lots of effects to the body. So mainly due to all these added chemicals, there's a variety of effects that come into play. So if smoked before the age of 25, when the brain is not fully developed, it can be harm to parts of the brain that allow for mood, control, learning, and attention, essentially just impairing judgment, which helps them further even push to keep smoking because they're not necessarily realizing the effects that's going on. Also, the chemicals that provide for the flavoring can injure the lungs, as well as the vapor particles. They lead to coughing, wheezing, and even bigger effects to people with asthma. And then the heavy metals in the cigarettes can lead to organ damage and buildup in blood. But also, there's another chemical that's added known as volatile organic compounds. And these lead to irritation in the ears, nose, and throat. And they can lead to headaches, nausea, and even organ damage. As well as there are formaldehydes, which we all know that are very toxic, that are leading to lung cancers and throat cancers. So some of the signs and symptoms of CVD that can be found are chest pain, weakness or numbing sensation of arms and legs, shortness of breath, faster, slower heartbeats and palpitations, dizziness, lightheadedness or fainting, fatigue, and sometimes even water retention. These are all signs and symptoms to pay attention to when someone is consistent in smoking or vaping. And then ways to treat CVD. One of the main ways to treat CVD is to maintain your health, stay healthy, eat well, and exercise. And then if you already have CVD, depending on the severity, it's best to be treated and evaluated by cardiologists to stop it from furthering. So making sure and getting your annual checkups, making sure that you're consistently being checked out for your heart. And then in the case of severity, for already having CVD, you might want to consider medication. So blood thinners, statins for cholesterol, beta blockers, ACE inhibitors, nitrates, angiotensin receptor blockers, diuretics, and calcium channels, which will help for your hypertension. And then in the occasion of serious illnesses, there are different surgeries such as heart transplants or coronary stents to help widen blood vessels and keep the heart pumping. So ways to prevent CVD. There's a multitude of ways of preventing CVD, but the most specific preventative measures is making sure and eating healthy, exercising, making sure and not smoking, and if you're already smoking, to stop smoking, as well as getting cardiology and pulmonary screenings consistently to make sure you're not at a risk or already have cardiovascular disease. And then some of the associated risks of CVD. So CVD not necessarily is caused only by vaping, but there are other causes that will add to the effects of smoking. So weight, diet, and lifestyle. Also, if you're diabetic, you're at an added increase of getting cardiovascular disease. If you have high blood pressure or high cholesterol, it may be a sign of CVD, but it could also lead to CVD. And then some of the healthcare effects of vaping. So there have been many health studies that have been set to establish a baseline of how vaping affects the body, especially the heart. But as of now, there are many studies on humans and other animals alike that are similar to us in the way we function. And then they're being set to understand when and how to take action. And as well, it's being understood where the main contributors of health when it comes to taking vape. And then as for the government effects of vaping, when it comes to the government, there are some fundings that are being set to reduce the creation of e-cigarettes and set educational programs, but not as much can be set because majority of these big corporations fund lots of the legislatures and officials to become politicians, and they help them run their campaigns. So it's a lot harder for them to set legislation when they're already being funded, so they already have an added interest to not go against them. And then as for the government, how they've gone about trying to reduce this, they've set laws such as taxing e-cigarettes, restricting the age of buying, retail licensure, and smoke-free laws. But they can only push it so far when there's already a bias. Okay. Ways in which we can manage CVD in the US. This is the personal way that I think we can try and push to decrease the amount of people that are being diagnosed with CVD. So we can push for citizens to have cleaner diets by restricting the production of processed foods, push for easier access to parks and free recreational centers to ensure that citizens are going out and exercising more. Because the main problem with a lot of citizens nowadays is that they don't have the resources to be able to go out and actually exercise, especially with long work days and how far it could be. So by adding more of a reason for them to go out and more of an accessible way of going out, it'll really help them to push to be healthier and try and exercise more. And then as well, one of the major reasons we can or ways that we can go about this is to have better screenings and more accessibility to healthcare to ensure that CVD is being maintained. Aside from, of course, pushing for more legislation to stop vaping. And then CVD and vaping effects for the future generations. Since there's an increase in toxins that's being added to the body, not only does vaping cause short-term effects, but they also lead to long-lasting damage to organs and can even create genetic abnormalities in fetuses. And as well, this creates a dependency and addiction to vaping. And this creates a discrepancy in the productive citizens due to how much of the population already vapes and how many would continue to vape due to how common and desensitized it's become. So, as we talked about in the last slide, there's a lot of addictive effects of vaping. Since there's nicotine in vapes, which is a highly addictive drug, the persons, or the people rather, become used to and dependent on the euphoric feeling of vaping, and this pushes them to constantly need it, or else they have negative effects. The negative effects can lead to bad and disastrous physical and emotional states, and this just furthers the unnecessary need for vapes and how negative it can be not only to the body but to society as a whole. And then ways to stop vaping. So see, these are some of the ways that I came up with that we can propose laws to keep vapes out of our society. So for starters, we can ban all uses of electronic cigarettes or smoking in general. We can also ban the use of smoking and vaping in all types of media unless for historical accuracy or showing its negative aspect to avoid romanticizing it. Essentially to keep all these depictions of smoking and keeping especially children because of how influenced they can be from wanting to smoke. And then federal mandatory educational programs placed in schools to avoid vaping usages. So by having educational programs as young as elementary school and even again in middle school and high school, you'll keep children from wanting to smoke because they'll see the negative aspects of what smoking can do. And then also federal set rehabilitation programs for nicotine addicted people because a major problem is that these people smoke and then they get addicted to it and then there's no way for them to stop doing it because there's no resources for them to stop doing it. So by having them stop smoking and deal with their problems, then you'll stop vaping essentially as a whole. And this will, of course, substantially decrease CVD that's caused by vaping. So to conclude, vaping is a highly addictive substance and it's being widespread to the younger generation. If not reduced or stopped, then the effects will be detrimental and create a surge in sickly future generations with cardiovascular disease. Okay, that is all. Thank you so much for coming to my lesson on cardiovascular disease.